5.1b, okay? We are talking slope. And slope has a formula that you need to get very familiar with because you're going to use it a lot in the rest of what we do. It is this. You'll always have a point. Let's do this. If you have an x1, y1, and then some other point, x2 and y2, okay? So you have 2 points. We'll say point A and point B. You're always going to have an x1, y1, and an x2, y2, and the way that slope formula works is you find the difference in the y values, so y2 minus y1, and then you put it over the difference in the x values, which would be x2 minus x1. So that's always going to be your slope formula. It's just the change in your y's over the change in your x's, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you, this is like example 3 from the book because this is the second half of the lesson. I'm going to give you points and say, what is the slope of the line through these 2 points? So if I have -1, 0, and 3, -2. Okay, if I want to know the slope between those 2 points, all you have to do is plug those points into this slope formula. But you have to be real careful about what you plug in where, okay? You have 2 points, so one of them has to be your x1 and your y1. That does not mean -1, 0 has to be your ones. You could use 3, -2 as x1, y1. And then the -1, 0 would be x2, y2. What matters in these problems is you have to keep your ones together and your twos together. It does not matter which point is which. It just matters the ones stay together, the twos stay together. Okay, so if this is x1, then 0 would be y1. If 3 is x2, then -2 has to be y2. Okay? Once you get to that point, now it's just a matter of plug it into the formula. So if our formula is y2 minus y1, what would that look like with the numbers we have? Right, so y2 is -2, y1 is 0, so that's the top of your slope, okay, your numerator. Your denominator is x2 minus x1. What's x2 right now? 3, okay, and then here's where you have to be careful also. It's subtraction in the formula. So if it's 3 minus, and then this one is a negative number, make sure you keep the negative with it. 3 minus a -1. When you simplify that, what's -2 minus 0? -2, okay. 3 minus a -1 is going to become plus a +1. So that would be 4. And then you just always reduce it as low as you can go. So if it's -2 over 4, it's actually what? -1/2. Okay, so that would be the slope, which we often represent with the letter M, right? Was our slope of -1/2. Yeah, Avery.
So I understand how you got the -1/2, but I don't know. I did not follow how you got the -2, 0.
Okay, so this is the formula, right? y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So I'm just going to assign one of these as x1, y1 down below. My -1, 0 is going to be my x1, y1. That means that this has to be my x2 and y2 then. So my first point, x1, y1, my second point, x2, y2. Then I'm going to take those values, so y2 minus y1, -2 minus 0. That's going to go on top because that's this portion of it, -2 minus 0. Okay? Bella. It's subtraction. It's x2 minus x1. So x2 is 3 minus x1. x1 is -1. So it's 3 minus a -1, which would become plus a positive. Okay? Let me just show you that if you switched your points around, you would still get the same thing, okay? If I flipped this, where this was x2, y2 instead, and this was x1, y1 instead, if I were to plug that into y2 minus y1, now it would be 0 minus a negative 2, and then x1 minus x2, switched around, so x2 minus x1 would be negative 1 minus 3. Notice what happens. This is now plus a positive. We get 2. Negative 1 minus 3 is negative 4, which is a negative 1/2. So it does not matter which ones are your 1 and which ones are your 2s. It just matters that the 1s stay together and the 2s stay together. Does that make sense? Okay, let's do another one. You had a question, Jada?
So you said it doesn't matter. You can switch them around and just come out at the same thing?
Yes, as long as your x1 and y1 stay together, right? And x2, y2 stay together. Yeah, I'll show you on this one. Let's say same problem. I want to know what is the slope of, you have the points 4, 1, and negative 3, negative 3. Okay? Yeah.
Will slope always be the formula up top, like the y2 minus y1?
Yes. To find slope, you'll always do y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Okay? Okay, so now here's the thing. Your first step is assign letters with a number to each number that we have. So if I call 4, 1 my x1, if I call 4 my x1, what is my 1 going to be? y1, okay? And that's the other place that people sometimes struggle, is people call 4 x1 and then they call the 1 x2. But remember, your x value is always the first number in a point. Your y value is always the second number in a point. So just make sure this stays x and y, not x1, x2, okay? That does not work. You can't do both as x's. One's an x, one's a y, okay? So if this is x1, y1, what's negative 3, negative 3? x2 and y2, okay? All right, so then we're going to plug that into this formula. What would that look like? What's going to be on top? Right, negative 3 minus 1, right? That's y2 minus y1. So negative 3 minus 1 over what's going to be on bottom? Minus the 4, right? Minus your x1. So negative 3 minus 4. Okay, so then when we simplify that, negative 3 minus 1 is negative 4. Negative 3 minus 4 is negative 7. What's a negative 4 over negative 7? It's not 3. You can't divide those, 4 and 7. But what's a negative divided by a negative? Positive, okay? So if you get something like this where they're both negative, your answer is actually the positive of that, okay? Let's do one more. Yeah, Jada.
Is the y always going to be on top of the x?
Y is always on top. Yeah, you'll always do y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So let's say I gave you 3, 6, and negative 2, 8. What do you do first? There's a comedy of errors in here right now. You do what?
You try to define which one's the x and which one's the y.
Right. So what would we call our 3?
X.
X1. It could be x2, okay? You can call it either one, x1 or x2. So if this is x1, what does 6 have to be?
Y.
Y1, okay? Which would make this x2 and this y2, okay? Now you plug it into the formula. So it's going to be y2 minus y1, so 8 minus 6 over what? Negative 2 minus 3. Okay, then you simplify. So 8 minus 6 would be 2. What's negative 2 minus 3? negative 5. So your slope is a negative 2/5. Okay, it doesn't matter if that negative's with the top number or the bottom number, it's still negative 2/5. But if there's a negative with both, you get rid of it because a negative divided by a negative is a positive. Does that make sense? Okay, so that is finding slope. The next example is dealing still with slope, but with horizontal and vertical lines. Okay, here's what I want to show you. Let's say we have a coordinate plane. Actually, we're going to do 2 coordinate planes. One here, one here. Okay, on our first one, we have a line like this. On the second one, we have a line like this. Okay? If we are talking slope for those lines, every horizontal line has the same slope, and every vertical line has the same slope. You just need to be able to remember which one is which, what slope it has. And here's how you can do that. If you can't memorize which one is which, you can always find it with points that you have. So say this is 1, 2, 3, okay? This point right here would be 0, 3, okay? But I could also go over here and say that point is 4, 3. Could you find the slope of that line right now? Do you have an x1, y1, x2, y2? Yeah. You do, right? So even if they don't plot the points for you, because you know where it is on the graph, you could still solve for the slope. I'm going to tell you what the slope will always be, but you can always solve for it, okay? Here's the deal. A horizontal line, which is what we have on that first one, okay, will always have a slope of 0. And here's how I tell people to remember it. There is an O at the beginning of the word horizontal, right? It's not the very beginning, but there's an O there. Your slope of a horizontal line is 0 every single time. Here's proof that it is. If I plugged this into x1, y1 and x2, y2 and did the slope formula, I would get 3 minus 3 over 4 minus 0. Well, 3 minus 3 is 0 divided by 4. What's 0 divided by anything? 0, okay? That means my slope here is 0, okay? So you don't need the points to be able to tell me the slope is 0 because every single horizontal line will have a slope of 0 every single time, okay? Whereas a vertical line, with a vertical line, if I were to do the same thing, let's say this is 1, 2, 3, then this point right here is negative 3, 0. And this point right here might be negative 3, 2, okay? If I try and plug that into slope formula, I'm going to get 2 minus 0 over negative 3 minus negative 3. Well, 2 minus 0 is 2. What's negative 3 plus 3? 0. Here's the issue. If you plug 2 divided by 0 into your calculator, it's going to tell you syntax error. Do you know why? You cannot divide something into 0 pieces, right? So if you try to divide by 0, it does not work. So we say for a vertical line, your slope will always be undefined, okay? Because you will get syntax error every time if you try to plug that in. And the way I try to tell people to remember this, I don't know if this is helpful or not, but the letter V and the letter U are very similar, right? So a vertical line has an undefined slope, okay? So think V and U are very much a similar shaped letter. So a horizontal line is always 0. A vertical line is always undefined, okay? So tell me this. What is the slope of the black line?
0.
undefined every single time, okay? What is the slope of this blue line? 0 every single time, okay? So any horizontal line will always have a slope of 0. Any vertical line will always have a slope that is undefined, okay? This would be undefined. This would be 0, okay? Okay, last thing. Yeah, Jada.
So how do you plug in like the numbers like if you was like doing like
On this one, the last one?
not the last one, the one above, like how would you like plug
This one?
Yeah, like how would you plug it in?
So I used this as my x1, y1, and I used this as my x2, y2. So then it was y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1.
Oh, and then you plug it in.
So you plug that in, but when you get to this point, 2 divided by 0, if you plug that into your calculator, it's going to say syntax error, which should tell you undefined, right? Because an undefined slope means we can't give you a slope for that because you're dividing by 0.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So yeah, if ever you see syntax error on your calculator, if you're trying to plug it in, go with undefined. Okay? Okay, last thing is just a kind of a cheat sheet for how you can determine some slope stuff. I'm going to give you 4 lines right now, and we're just going to talk about what the slope would be. Okay, and they don't need to be identical to mine, just something along these lines will be just fine. My point in showing you this is so that you see the difference in how slopes work. So if a line is on its way up, going left to right, what do you suppose is true of that slope? Any guesses? We kind of talked about this on Friday. It's positive, okay? If a line is on its way up, that is a positive slope. Okay, what if a line is on its way down? That one's negative. Okay, what if a line is horizontal? That's 0, okay, or you can write it as 0, that's fine too. And what if a line is vertical? Undefined, okay? So if you see a graph and you look at the graph and it looks like this, and then you plug it into slope formula and your answer comes out as this, that does not make sense, right? Because the slope is going up, which means it should be positive, but you found something negative. So something is wrong in how you plugged it in, okay? This should be an alarm to you, like, oh, nope, that can't be the right slope because it should be a positive slope, okay? What's that? Positive? But this,
I'm just saying like what?
I know, but be careful with that because this is undefined, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Whatever works for you. Any questions on that?
Yes.
Yes? What's your question? What? Slow.
I was looking one more.
Subtracting or
The what?
the subtracting part, what is that called?
Y2 minus Y1? That one? That's the slope formula. So you're finding slope using that. Here, let's do one more, and then we're done. Let's say you have 5, -2, and 1, 1. Okay? And I say find the slope. What are you going to call your 5?
X1.
Okay, so if we call that x1, what is -2? Y1. Does 5 have to be x1? No, it could have been x2, but then -2 has to be y2, okay? So x1, y1, that would make this x2, y2, and here's your formula, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, okay? This will be the slope formula every single time. So if we're gonna plug into that, what goes here? Y2. That's your 1 minus a -2, okay? Minus a -2. Make sure you're not saying minus a +2, okay? The formula is subtraction. What's going to go here? 1. It's your x2, okay? So x2 is 1 minus what? The 5, right? So it's y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Okay, then we simplify that. Minus a negative is plus a positive, so 1 plus 2 is 3. 1 minus 5 is negative 4. So your slope is a negative 3/4. Okay, what would that look like if we drew the line? Going, is that, yes, because that would be positive to me, so negative to you. It's got to be on its way down. Okay, basically what we're saying is if I'm here and I go to here, I'm going 1, 2, 3 down, 1, 2, 3, 4 over. Okay? Okay. You can go y1 minus y2 over x1 minus x2. You'll get the same thing. Yeah.
That way.